So Michael survives his surgery, which is great. I bet you were worried. I just wanted to tell you all of that before we begin season 3 of Jane the Virgin. I know we were with bated breath. I'm so glad I binged this and didn't watch this in real time. That would have been devastating. So sorry to everybody who had to go through that and wait for the answer. And I guess at one point, if you're really obsessed, you can now look to see who was returning the season. But I don't know. You can't always trust it because sometimes they bring people back. But anyway, let's continue with season 3. Jane's dad gets arrested because he gives out urine samples to people on Twitter, which is very weird. I guess they give a clean drug test. I don't know. I don't understand. Jane's dad, again, you know how I feel about him. Must I say it for a third time? Okay. Then they do this thing that I hate. So I guess 2 years before her 21st birthday, Jane was crushing on this guy, Sam, and then he asked her out the day after her 21st birthday. But as you remember, she met Michael on her 21st birthday. And so Jane then goes and lies to Michael about that and said that she was sick. And then Michael brought Jane soup for her cold. And I hate that they added this plot because it takes away from season 1, because it's there's no way that with everything going on with Raphael, when she started to choose Raphael, that Michael would not have brought up this moment and how upset he was. And it just it kind of weakens their perfect love story. Let just them have a perfect love story and not make Jane this person that kind of flip-flops between people, because I feel the way the first season was presented, it was that this was a very first struggle for her and one of the first times.
Are you sleeping?
And also that thing
He's
of,
it's not my fucking bedtime, dude.
Now there's this other person that I had a crush on years ago, right?
Fucking
that's
bright here.
A little bit of a successful thing. It feels kind of uncharacteristic like Jade, because I feel too, after that good night with Michael, I don't know that she would go straight back to Sam, but now it just kind of sets her up as this thing, which also could be, daddy issues. So, all right, fine. But I hate it, okay? I didn't like. Jane and Michael's mother have never really gotten along, but they bond over their mutual love for Michael. So there's that. And Raphael had slept with Petra's sister, unbeknownst, thinking that it was Petra. But he just is he didn't feel anything with her, and he doesn't want to do that, especially as they are also sharing custody for kids. Poor Raphael is in such a custody battle, but anyway, he's not feeling it for Petra, and Petra's sister is gonna avenge him. And Rose has sedated and abducted Louisa, and Louisa wakes up on a submarine. No big deal. We all wake up on a submarine sometimes, as the song goes, right? Jane promises Michael a cat on his deathbed, because that's what she thought, so they have a cat. They also bring Petra closer from the hospital to the hotel so that it's easier to inject her. And Zoe comes clean to the dad about how she is carrying Esteban, his enemy's child, but she is not keeping it and is going to undergo an abortion, which is, a lot. More so than the abortion, I feel I would just have nightmares about being, injected with all of this stuff that Petra is. That is a terrifying situation. I guess Russians really don't play. So Jane is having a lot of PTSD about Michael getting shot, and she does not want him to go back to work. Honestly, it's a really great example of PTSD. They move in with Zomara and Alba, again, while Michael is in a wheelchair and getting used to it. Michael says that, he doesn't want to quit his job, which is awful, but because he said that he would have beforehand, but he just said before he did it because he was worried about losing her, and now they're married, so it is what it is. Petra's sister starts a relationship with Scott, who's this employee manager, and the reason they bond is that Scott has a burn book with blackmail material on everybody at the hotel, and he wants to take down Raphael, which is just, alright. Okay. Also, it's so weird when Jane's dad does an American accent, just because his Hispanic one is just so much better and good. I'm used to it after all this stuff. Michael accidentally calls Jane his mom. That's super awkward. Due to all the stress, Mateo is biting kids' legs. A Big Little Lies moment there. And yeah, I'm sure it's just from all of the stress of the situation. But anyway, Michael and Jane have sex at So finally, I'm so glad that they did. I was worried. I couldn't remember in this like review if they had sex before, and I was just like, oh, did she wait till Raphael? Like, I guess I had forgotten that her and Michael had sex because virgin is such a big part of her identity. But anyway, they had sex and they finished at the same time, and it was this big, lovely, perfect moment. They've done sex stuff before, but she's officially not a virgin. Michael falls asleep right after the sex. Boys do it. That's very, very real. And then Jane actually makes a sex tape that she sends to her advisor, and her advisor was so rude about it. They mention the CW in this episode, so it exists in this universe, but it's the network that they're on, so it's very, very silly. Mutter is murdered in her cell by Sinrostro, and it is revealed that Alba's sister is the one who said that Alba wasn't a virgin at her wedding. Also, at one point they use lube that hurts, and that's rough, because there is that lube that burns is just rough. The reason that Alba's sister told about Alba's secret of not being a virgin is that she was in love with Alba's husband. Jane kind of guessed it in her fictionalized version too. Sometimes you just pick up things in the air. You got that woman's sense of intuition. You can't hide anything. Also, Jane's dad breaks up with this person he's dating, Dina, via tweet because he realizes he's still in love with Jane's mom. It's just, he is the worst sometimes. Also, I wasn't clear about why they mentioned CW. They mentioned CW because Rogelio is trying to get his show on CW to be like an American star officially, to cross over. So Jane and Michael get evicted because they're not paying their rent because Petra is paralyzed. They cross out virgin on the title log, and I kind of love it. Coach Beast from Glee shows up. They got that Glee crossover with Alba and her, but Coach Beast comes up as like their landlord, I guess, and is like, hey, you need to sell shares. And Louisa kind of is just feeling like a bad sister, and she is drinking because she is choosing Rose over brother. She decides to go to rehab though, so don't worry. So Jane and Michael move into a smaller apartment, which that's rough. Jane fights with Petra about it, but there's really nothing she can do, you know? Unfortunately, Jane lies about her and Michael's budget, and they have a fight about that. Jane doesn't really think Michael is good with money, and he's like pissed at her because he's been living on his own and she's been living with her parents, and like, oof, girl, he got a point, though. Alba quits her nursing job that she never liked, and because now she has a green card, and she works as a shop assistant at the hotel. Raphael made a deal with the police not to be jailed for the insider training, but it'll be void if he does any other, like, illegalities and stuff. And Petra's sister wants Ralph's shares, and he threatens about the dirty money, and Michael's partner tells Michael about, you know, how Mutter is dead and that there's these 4 highlighted words: angels guard the sun/sun. Jane ends up realizing that it's Petra's sister, not Petra, because Jane's so freaking smart. Alba gets all mad at Jane because she had donated to her sister's GoFundMe for like medicine, which is really rough but Alba's is just really mad because her own mother had died, not speaking to Alba because of what her sister did to her, which is really awful. Why do families do this? Like, why do we just like talk it out? Really, is anything so big we can't really talk about? Like, that's blood. Like, why do we got all these problems? You know, whatever. Anyway, I feel like this season the narrator gets a little repetitive in phrases, but you know, I mean, at this point we're like past 40 episodes, so it is rough. Jane has like a cousin she never really got to see. I feel like her abuela is like a little out of line, and there's like a lot of grief and anger there that, you know, mental health not really a thing in the Hispanic community always, and it needs to be earlier, and that's, you know, puts it in the down row of like talking out these feelings and learning to process it and not just like hiding them all away, and you know, but can't help the past. Anyway, so Jane ends up rooting the wedding because Petra's sister was like engaged to Scott. They end up doing Grease. I don't know why Grease is like always in everything. I wonder if it's like a deal Grease has made with studios, or if it's just like an ownership thing or what, or if it's like the only musical people know. I don't understand. Zoe decides that she is going to give up on being a singer and open a dance school. Scott ends up trying to sue Petra for sexual harassment, which is, damn, it's kind of caught, but it's actually Petra's sister, so I don't know what they do about all of that. But Raphael and Catalina, who is Jane's cousin, have a spark. That's a little awkward, but I guess they're gonna pursue it. Oh no. Petra wants to get Raphael out of the hotel. She was gonna pretend to be her sister with Scott, but ends up breaking it off, which is for the best. So I understand why Scott is suing her. Jane's dad has a part in a US film Going Naked. I guess it's relatively, I don't feel like it is that easy, honestly, to get a dude part, but when you do, gotta go with it. It's honestly a pretty good body compliment, to be real. Somebody wants to pay to see you naked, Also, Michael, Raphael, and Rogelio, Jane's dad, they hang out together for the first time, and Raphael ends up apologizing for not even considering that Jane was engaged to Michael when they were first falling in love. Definitely, just a selfish wish guy. Raphael is not always the most, aware when it comes to that. And Michael apologizes for his recent behavior. I think he's taken on a lot of his, hurt on Raphael from just, his shooting accident and everything. Rogelio wants more children and is trying to find a donor and stuff, and then he ends up signing this high school dance troupe to meet girls. He's a big ol' yeesh. Jane obviously doesn't want Raphael to date cousin, which I think it's weird, so it makes sense to me, because that's what is that gonna happen to Mateo? It's almost incestual in some ways. It's just he can date literally anybody. Why does it have to be Jane's cousin? But Michael is getting a lot of sensitivity and stuff. He's kind of getting all mad about that and thinks that why is Jane trying to control what Raphael does? But it's also it's weird, and it would make things awkward in the family. Michael is being too sensitive, and I think she's probably in some chronic pain and whatever. Jane ends up being so mean to her cousin, and she's not annoying. She's just enjoying life. Raphael gets dirty because he gets his share back from Petra, and he was kind of having Scott falsely accuse Petra of sexual harassment, even though it wasn't really Petra, it was her sister. I like Raphael, and then he does stuff like this, he does a little something where I'm no, sir. So Alba is making everybody feel guilty about, not bringing Mateo to church. Raphael does not want Mateo at church, but Jane just brings it against his wishes, and he starts remembering that he was at a convent. They do a bunch of nods to other things in theater and film in this television. It's very funny. My one business partner wanted to do that too in some things. I wonder if that's just, I don't know. I'm very much do it original, do it different, but I guess people nods to stuff because it's so weird. Doing historical nods to stuff is just basically theater and television. So it's so interesting that is a through line in a creative. It's not necessarily always doing something original. It's doing an interpretation of somebody's work that you liked. Great artist steal, I guess. But I will say the actor seemed a little uncomfortable and awkward in the Hitchcock scenes, but that's just Hitchcock. Jane hadn't been to church since Michael was shot because she was really mad at God. So they find out that Raphael's mother had been paying a convict 10 grand a month, and Raphael finds out that he was not born in America but in Italy, and that his mom and his father are not his biological parents, which, holy, poor dude, that is a lot. Basically, Raphael's father was paying a nun to steal money. Rough. What's happening? Why are you so evil? What is happening? Yeah, it's very unclear if that Raphael came from an orphanage or, he was given away by his birth parents. But yeah, they're basically having this nun steal art in exchange for money. And then they have been paying off the nun to keep Raphael in secrecy, which is just oof, Meanwhile, Zoe, Jane's mom, is dating a guy that's married, and Rogelio finds somebody to carry his own child because he doesn't want to miss out on the things that he missed out with Jane, which is just, ugh, I'm sorry every time I'm just so exhausted talking about Jane's dad's plans. just a little too close to mine, I guess. My own father, and just a big old sigh there. But yeah, Michael didn't pass his physical, so he can't go into the forest, and he has to do desk duty, which is rough. Meanwhile, her cousin is like actually with an old man and is like stealing jewels low-key. And she has a husband, but they're getting divorced, the cousin, so it's fine, maybe. Anyway, Michael's so upset about his job, he wants to be a stand-up comedian. And Jane is like helping him by whispering jokes. You know, not everybody has that person to like help you out at the beginning. Raphael continues to be the worst because he calls Petra paranoid when she gets suspicious about him working with Scott, and he just gaslights her, even though she went through all this trauma. And it's just awful. At least Petra is smart enough because she poses as her sister and finds it out through Scott, you know, that he is working against her. But it's just, Raphael, why? You are a father. Act better. You do worst. Raphael finds out that his dad said that his hairs have to be his biological children, which he is not. And Petra finds out because she's got cameras in it, which is in his room. Which Petra, you know, not the best, girly. Jane is meddling with her mom's relationship. She goes to talk to Bruce's daughter, who is just vicious, like says her outfit is basic. Devastating. But also, do we like, I don't know, if a teenager insulted me, I feel like when a younger kid just insults me, I'm like, oh, they don't have manners, so that's sad. But I'm just like I didn't know about style when I was 7 either, girl, so you don't know. You don't know what it's like to be living. Michael wants to be a lawyer, but the narrator says, alas, hold your breath. I hinted about this. I love that they call Mateo Mr. Sweetface. That's my Mr. Milo is Mr. Sweetface. I'm going to start calling Mr. Milo that. Jane's dad gets a boner on set because he's got feelings for the matchmaker. Just class act, y'all. Class act. So we still have the Catalina problem. Anyway, she can't have children. She intentionally kept Raphael at a distance. Her and Jane end up friendly terms, but she's relieved to see her go. Petra offered her like $10,000 to keep Raphael out of his apartment because there's cameras in there. Meanwhile, Michael fails his practice test. He thinks this is all over. Raphael ends up finding the cameras Petra had anyway. Petra is just having PTSD from being paralyzed. She promises she's going to seek therapy. Her sister gets married, so things are settling down. They make peace. She shreds the biological will thing so that nobody will know. And Raphael is also like, hey, Catalina, I just can't get involved. There's too much going on. He literally does have a lot. He's got 2 twins. He's got Mateo, the hotel, like figuring out his whole family stuff. It's just a lot. Alba, Jane's grandmother, has a crush on Jorge. Ralph, too, was like all going to go turn himself in. And then Jane's dad is all mad because his penis and his full frontal got cut off, and the matchmaker ends with this huge dick. It's honestly beautiful. It goes, well, I didn't see your penis. I did see a huge dick, which is amazing. Bruce, who Jane got involved with, goes to Jane's house wasted. Yeah, Raphael was going to turn himself in stuff, but I'm glad Petra stopped all of that. Even though Raphael maybe should go to jail, but he's so handsome. Let's keep him outside. Also, Mateo is developing a little slower than other kids, probably from all of this stress, and they're a little worried about it. So Michael then has a heart attack during the LSAT. I hate it. I hate it so much. I don't want him to die. It's so sad. Jane starts screaming. It's so much. Raphael turns himself in anyway, and then he has to serve prison time. Rose pays Luisa's girlfriend. She wants her to do plastic surgery, and she pays her $10 million to leave the country because she is obsessed with Luisa. Luisa's new girlfriend anyway was Rose this whole time, so there's that. She literally cannot escape. She relies on her grandma for help again because she is so lost. Poor Jane. They just go to 3 years later because let's just skip all of the grief stuff. She's like using a sticker system with her publicist boss. She's got like a terrible boss. She changed thesis novel to writing about Abuela to writing a novel about her and Michael with a happily ever after. Zoe lives with Bruce, and Alba and Jane live together, and her father is getting married to Darcy, the matchmaker. Teo is behaving awful, probably from all of the stress, and luckily, the matchmaker, they were only getting married on set, fake married. They're reopening the Marbella, their hotel, branding it as the second happiest place on earth. Meanwhile, compared to Mateo, Petra's children are very well behaved. And Ralph got super zen in prison. He's mellow, softer. I really like his beard. The Marbella is booked out 6 months in advance. Petra is also sleeping with the neighboring competition of the hotel. Raphael is dating a greeting card owner. Scott ends up being killed and buried on the beach of the Marbella. Gonna be terrible for business. They have to get an aide for Mateo to be focused at school. Petra sometimes has the worst taste in men because let me tell you about the Fairwick Hotel owner where the $2 million was stashed. He's just like, he's skeezy. He's a strip club owner. He's like doing illegal obster, but he doesn't sue Petra even when he finds out bad stuff because he loves her. So that helps a lot. Mateo will listen in martial arts, but he doesn't get invited to parties because he hit someone. Jane cries because she can't read her book about Michael. Raphael says, hey, you gotta read it. And Jane ends up getting a book deal, but she's just getting panic attacks and she needs to seek advice. Petra moves Scott to the Fairwick Hotel so that it just doesn't ruin the publicity. That's illegal to do, but I understand it, girl. I get it. You have to. Anyway, Jane wants to quit her publishing job because her boss sucks, but she needs 6 months and she can't go anywhere because you're not going to get the $50,000 that you can get from a book all at once. It is sometimes weird, and I understand they do this for like the audience things, but it's like if you knew Spanish and your grandmother spoke to you in Spanish, you would speak back in Spanish, I would assume, not English, but that's not the way CW did it. Jane's dad ends his reality contract because Alba is like, yo, you are losing yourself, but he's being sued for it. They ruled that Scott was an accidental drowning because he was very drunk, which is good. Like, if it was a murder, that would be rough for them. So Jane forgets to bring glasses for the PTA, and also her editor is a skadoosh, and she's just not getting along with him. She's just finding a lot of conflicts with people. Really do not like the fact that the narrator thinks Jane is a man-hater. I don't really think she is. I do think she is a feminist, but that's not a man-hater. But maybe a machismo narrator would think that. Raphael does not really know. He's just not really feeling it with Greeting Card Abby. The narrator keeps, like, forgetting her anyway. They were gonna move in, but he breaks out there instead. But Zove, Jane's mom, gets engaged to Bruce, and she accepts. And Jane's dad tells Jane that Mateo is feeling like the kid he never got, and it's not feeling like a deal breaker. I wish he would have known that back then, that he could have those moments as a grandfather, but he's so self-absorbed. What can you do? Raphael is seeing Petra as this protective dragon, it is such a vibe for Petra, and Jane knows that Petra and Ralph are together. Jane then starts kind of remembering that she was in love with Raphael. Maybe the writers are also remembering it too, because it kind of gets dropped. But he was kind of cold in dealing with his stuff. But yeah, because she sees him with Petra, she kind of just shoves it again, and Ralph is seeing Alex the aide flirting and tells him, not to, but he wasn't, and it's very awkward. Zoe ends up breaking up with Bruce, and Jane is back out there telling a story about Michael without crying, which is progress and strength. Anyway, they find out that Michael's death and Raphael's imprisonment is not affecting Mateo. Jane is just kind of feeling exhausted by dating because her brain is just overload, and she just already has a complicated and just wants a simple life. Jane's grandmother is getting more action than Jane, ironically, but Jane starts to crush on her dad's co-star, but she is not really his type, and it ends up just kind of being a fling. She doesn't really want to talk about her life in interviews. I think she should, because it's very, very cool in my opinion, but I get it, maybe a little. Zoe breaks off her engagement with Bruce because she just realizes that she still has feelings for Rogelio. Rogelio gets out of his lawsuit, which is kind of sucks because he gets away with everything, but sure. Alba is sleeping over at Jorge's, only sleeping, no sex, but Petra is in touch with her sister and lies about it to the cops, but the cops are monitoring her emails because Petra is a bitches. Rose and Louisa are back. She's wearing a mask. I have a hard time believing that Jane does not have any social following, that she's trying to build as an author, because I feel like anybody with her dad who was like talking all about Jane would have ended up following her. Ralph also hired this guy named Elvis, who is a private investigator, but he lies and says that he is an ex-con, but he's really a private investigator to protect them from Sin Rostro. The co-star Fabian, that Jane has a crush on, does more to get more followers for paparazzi. Says Jane, like, broke her heart, and he's gonna tell her dad. Her followers are all Latin American, and her book isn't gonna translate till Pin Run, though, too. The publishing world is so heartbreakingly tough. It really is challenging. I honestly just kind of gave my book idea up for a little bit because it was like, well, acting brings me a little bit more joy than writing, mostly because it just keeps me more active, and I need that, y'all. So I focused on that, but I got some good progress, and it'll happen in my lifetime, I know, but it's not my priority. So she decides that, you know what, they can just sell her however they want to get her into the book fair. I kind of really like her dating the co-star Fabian. He's goofy and good for her. Also, Jane's parents are back together. 20,000 copies of Jane's book have been ordered, and Fabian is writing his own book inspired by Jane. And then Petra's sister gets arrested because she comes back to the United States, even though she was told not to. But obviously Petra's sister is not that great of a listener. So Alba is getting her love story, even though she will not have sex until she is married. Jane had her first date ever at 14. I had mine at 10, which I think was kind of way too young, honestly. He bailed on me for my science project, which was rough. Petra stole Scott's burn book, and she gets close for her sister. She's jealous of Petra for flirting with Scott beforehand and causing Scott to break up for her. This co-star wants kind of a meaningful connection. Oh, what really happened is that Petra pretended to be her sister, and Petra fired Scott, then pretended to be Scott, dumped her sister during text, and then pretended to be her sister to break up with Scott just to get her sister out of her life for good. Alba, unfortunately, has this customer who's like, oh, people who speak English, and like anybody who says that, it's just like, oh, it's none of your business. But she wants to march for immigration rights, but if she does, her green card could be taken away, and Mateo's all worried about that. And we find out that Jorge is undocumented. He was scammed by his immigration lawyers, and he lost his savings, which is super unfair. And then poor Lydia and Jane, they're not really in the same place, and she didn't know how to be happy or sad around her, so she just waited so long for their life to click together. I really just want a friend to sit on the floor with, but I think I have it now. I didn't have it at the time of reviewing Jane, but I have it now, which is awesome. The racism in this episode was so powerful, but it does sometimes feel very heavy-handed about a microaggression, but I understand that we let microaggressions slide so much that I think sometimes you need a TV show to come in heavy-handed to be like, hey, can we just stop, because these small things add up over time. Mateo is 3 and still in diapers. I don't know if that was the case, if I was still 3 and in diapers, but it seems old to me, but what do I know about children? And I have a children's podcast. It's very fine. But anyway, Zoe proposes with her father's ring. It's very sweet, and I want to cry. I also love that she did it. They find out that JP Jerky Pants was Chuck, the guy Petra was seeing at the other hotel. I mean, there's no way he was not the villain, right? Casting just was like, let's just get it written right on. And Mateo is at 3 and asking about sex. Oh my goodness, that's so much, you know? It's a lot to handle. Jane wants Raphael to be serious about his feelings with Petra. She doesn't want Petra to get hurt. Fabian he's had sex before, but he's waiting for a serious commitment to have sex again. And he's also made an album, but he can't really sing. And he's also very religious. And Jane is about to meet his abuela. Jane starts to really address that the flower scarring story, you know, had a really sex negative messaging that was maybe not all the best for her. And then also Jane has a job, kind of Sex in the City-esque, as writing as a 28-year-old widow for Cosmopolitan. Jane is just kind of deciding that Fabio would be a fling. but it's not going to go that way. Anyway, Mateo kind of is asking all about his upbringing, and then of course he goes and tries to make a baby. I knew he was going to do it. He has that energy. His family is getting a little out of control. It was already kind of made in an out of control situation. Somebody in this episode says hand sanitizer makes a good lube, and no way. Ow. What? Stop. So they make a lot of film jokes in this one. Fabian does like a Tom Cruise for Jane's, and Jane is just like, I just wanted you for sex, which is just like, ew. I'm glad that how Mateo asked how he gets made, even though he was made really unique, but I'm glad that they were mostly honest about the situation. Jane kind of tells Fabio that it's over because he only likes the idea of her and he doesn't really know a lot about her. Zoe and Jane's dad, Rogelio, are kind of debating having a weird wedding because they don't really want us to upset Jane, as Michael passed so shortly after hers. I really loved little heart glow that happens between people. It's so sweet. I love the magical realism when it comes in. Jane had casual sex and she didn't feel guilty about it. I usually don't feel great, and I really kind of don't like it because this guy really wanted a relationship, and it is just like kind of a weird person to have this with because he's kind of a sweetheart, and I feel like she could like him. Jane honestly thinks that Ralph and Petra are a terrible idea, and then Jane scares away the wedding planners for Ro and Zoe's wedding because they thought her mom was too old to be a princess, which is, it's so gross. Like, you're being hired to like create somebody's dream wedding. Just like do whatever they want. Like, what are you doing? So Raphael is working with the cops. He lies that he got cancer to get Luisa back. Rogelio and Fabian get into a fist fight because Fabian calls Jane a slut, and Rogelio wants to defend Jane's honor, and Jane punches Fabian after he tries to punch her dad. So it's getting rough, and of course they have to end things after that. Jane is jealous of what Petra and Raphael would have because she doesn't really have that with Michael because he is dead. And so she just feels like in their family too, her and Mateo would always be on the outside when she usually has been in center. Jane agrees to be her mom's maid of honor. They have to cancel party because they're both drunk and they forgot to cancel the stripper. And then they're extra and they drunk call Raphael. And Raphael admits that they'll never be on the outside because they're family, and when he thinks about family, they're who he sees, and he loves them so much. I thought Raphael might show up at her house, but no. They also want Jane to officiate their wedding. They're asking so much, but the police catch Rose, which is great. And Jane also has to deal with that she's got a crush on Raphael. But the matchmaker is 7 months pregnant. Find out that the real Aline is the killer of Scott. Jane finds out that Michael wrote this letter, and she really wants to read it. A dress gets trashed during a hurricane, and they can't take the car. The dress is ugly, but whatever, you know what? And they talk about, like, hard work and determination is a choice of the mom. I really cried at the grandmother speech to the mom. It was so sweet. They have all these little candles at the wedding. Jane is, like, dancing with Raphael. She's starting to believe in destiny and fate again. I wish that we didn't have a lot of Zoe and Rogelio's reactions of where Jane was going with her speech, but I get it. They're both sort of narcissists. But the commitment was a very good speech that they earned their happy ending, and she got her dream parents back. Petra ends up kissing the guy in the hotel, whatever his name is, I forgot, sorry. But Raphael sees it, and Petra is just, like, insecure because she's like, oh, I just know you're gonna choose Jane anyway. And Ralph didn't choose Jane because Jane also hasn't communicated. And at that moment, her kid conveniently wants to get put down, lol. But Petra is like, I know your feelings, you should choose me. And he thinks that he's just, like, crazy for saying that. And there's the, like, glow of the heart that I love, and Jane is deciding that she believes in destiny anyway. Petra ends up meeting the matchmaker. She names her ex and didn't say what she wanted in her head. Jane gets Michael's letter from the old apartment in the floorboard, and it was a small fate led me to you. It was very sweet. Raphael wants to meet Luisa and try to repair what happened because she and Petra's sister get released from prison because Luisa is going to give a testimony against Rose, but their relationship is ruined because Ralph calls her crazy like her mother, which isn't even true because her mom tried to flee her parents and mutter and being murdered. Petra thinks that it's Ralph that wants to meet her, but it turns out it's her sister, and she just stole the cell phone. Luisa got roofied, and Raphael ends up getting nothing and getting kicked out. She found Michael's letter that said, "First love found its way." There's a lot of great writing. These paper cranes go up. It's beautiful. And that's season 3. Sorry, the couple first ones were so disorganized. I'm still learning how to do TV on this platform, but yeah, let me know if you have any notes, any suggestions, things you want me to review, what you liked, what you didn't like, what you liked about this season, what you didn't like about this season, your favorite moments. Would love to hear them in the comments, and if you feel so inclined, feel free to donate and subscribe and follow me on all the socials, because all that stuff really helps. So thank you so much for being a part of this community. I would love to hear more of your thoughts always, and really appreciate you for watching this video. Have a great one. Bye. Also, this was my favorite season. Yeah, I liked it a lot. Okay, goodbye for real.